On this week's Whether or Not, we have some information about droughts happening in South Africa, as well as some bad news for bees that could potentially affect our own food supply. Later, Addis has a feature on the polar vortex and Jake with the extended forecast. All that and more on this week's Whether or Not. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Whether or Not. I'm your host, Bree Guy.
And I'm your forecaster, Jake Langedyk.
So Jake, we've been experiencing some warm weather lately after last week's cold episode. What can we expect for this upcoming long weekend?
Well, if you have any outdoor plans, I'm sorry to say they could very well be scuttled. Rain showers are going to be moving into our area Friday, but come Saturday, though, it's going to be a different story. Rain, sleet, snow, ice, we might very well see it all. So if you have any outdoor plans, want to catch up on Netflix, that'd be a perfect time to do it over this long weekend.
Sounds interesting, Jake, and we'll have more on that later, but as always, we'll be starting off with nature in the news.
Believe it or not, January is Radon Action Month, and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection is encouraging homeowners to get their homes tested for radon gas. Radon is an odorless, colorless gas that occurs from the breakdown of natural uranium in soil and rocks. This radioactive gas can seep through cracks in the foundation and eventually into homes. Patrick McDonnell, Secretary of the Pennsylvania DEP, says that Pennsylvanians are at higher risk for radon exposure due to the state's geology, and estimates that at least 40% of homes across the state have higher than acceptable levels of radon. The accepted threshold is 4 picocuries per liter of air, or 4 trillionths of a curie, a unit of radiation decay. Radon is known carcinogen and is the second leading cause of lung cancer right after cigarette smoke. The EPA states that around 21,000 people every year die from radon-contracted lung cancer. But the good news is radon test kits are available at most hardware stores, and if there is radon in your home, a professionally installed radon removal system is relatively inexpensive, usually around $300. It's a small price to pay to compare to the risks and future costs of contracting lung cancer.
Over the past few months, a new version was drafted for the City of Pittsburgh's Climate Action Plan. Shortly after the presidential decision to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement, the mayor of Pittsburgh stated that the city would not follow suit. The draft states that climate change is a major threat and that the City of Pittsburgh has been long in agreement of this. The plan aims to have a 20% greenhouse gas reduction by 2023 and 50% by 2030. They also strive for 25% of Pittsburgh customers to be 100% renewable energy and eliminate landfill emissions by 2030. However, some major environmentalists criticize the plan and are unsure if it will work. A major concern is that the plan is not clear on which of the goals is most likely to succeed and what should be prioritized. They state that Pittsburgh needs to go back to the drawing board and create plans with their goals.
If you thought the drought in California from some time ago was bad, a drought in South Africa is currently putting that to shame. A major drought is affecting the Western Cape region of the country, which includes the picturesque city of Cape Town, the second most populous city in South Africa. Since 2015, the area's dams have been dropping far below normal, with very little rainfall to replenish them. As of December, many of the dams that supply water to Cape Town are below 33% capacity. The situation is so dire, officials are warning residents that when dams drop below 13.5% capacity, taps will be turned off and water will be rationed, presumably under the 23-gallon limit currently being imposed. Unfortunately, that may be a reality as early as April, according to the Cape Town Mayor's Office. Because it's currently summer in the Southern Hemisphere, Cape Town is a popular tourist destination for those looking to escape the cold. Because tourism accounts for nearly 10% of South Africa's GDP, Dr. Anthony Turton of the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein says Cape Town is in a catch-22 situation, saying that tourists are putting a strain on the remaining water supply, but provide a much-needed boost to the country's economy. Locals and tourists alike are being encouraged to take 2-minute showers, refraining from washing laundry, and recycling water whenever possible.
According to University of Illinois entomology professor May Barenbaum, bees are like humans in that they sometimes like things that aren't necessarily good for them, which I can agree with to some extent. I have a bit of a sugar tooth, but sugar seems to not be enough for the bees. According to tests carried out by the University of Illinois, bees are preferring sugar syrup laced with fungicides over just plain sugar syrup, and that there have been links between the decline of bee populations to such fungicides. This could have negative impacts on our agriculture. A study done by the Center for Biological Diversity stated that bees provide more than $3 billion in fruit pollination services each year in the U.S. To help prevent further decline, the United Nations recently declared May 20th to be World Bee Day to help spread awareness.
Well, I certainly hope if you have any plans for this long weekend ahead, they are indoors, because weather-wise, it is going to be a brilliant mess, especially for Friday and Saturday. Speaking of which, first things first, Friday is going to start off a little bit on the rainy side, but as you can see, we have another system coming in west to east. It's going to start off rainy at first here in central Pennsylvania, but as you can see behind this cold front, rain, sleet, snow, ice, we are going to get the works as this cold front traverses west to east. Saturday, as you can see, State College is going to be right in the middle of what we call the transition line between snow and freezing rain. What's going to happen is that Saturday, it's going to start off with a wintry mix, transitioning over into snow by the afternoon, and then as this low pressure system works its way west-east, it'll finally leave by Saturday night, maybe early Sunday morning. And speaking of Sunday, good news for us, we will start to dry out a little bit, but we have cold air coming in down from Canada. It is going to cool things down quite a bit as we go through the second half of the long weekend. For Friday, it's going to feel a little bit warmer than usual. 55 degrees for your daytime high. Rain showers to start the day, transitioning over into scattered showers by the afternoon. But Friday night, though, this is when we expect the winter storm to come through our area. 29 degrees expected, nighttime low. Rain to start, but changing over into a wintry mix throughout the evening hours. Saturday, though, starting off as wintry mix, but changing over into snow. Temperatures hovering right around 32 degrees. So it's going to be a very slick day weather-wise. Then finally for Sunday, we do dry out, but temperatures way down in the lower 20s and overnight lows down into the single digits. And now for a look at this week's feature, we turn things over now to Juklo, who has a look at the polar vortex.
If you're a resident of Pennsylvania or the Northeast United States, you've likely heard the term polar vortex being thrown around in recent years. After record-breaking cold in the winter of 2015, it's a term that's being more commonly used in the media. But what exactly is the polar vortex, and how does it affect our weather here at home? Dr. Melissa Jervis is a professor of meteorology at Penn State. She conducts research in atmospheric and ocean circulations, something very relevant for a phenomenon like the polar vortex.
The polar vortex is a set of winds in the upper atmosphere, so in the stratosphere, as we call it, that rotate clockwise around the Arctic pole, and it also occurs in the Antarctic. There's also an Antarctic polar vortex, and this is related to pressure at that height being lower over the central Arctic.
The polar vortex lasts year-round. The stronger wintertime polar vortex is typically more tightly packed, holding the coldest air north of the United States. But through both natural variability and climate change, the polar vortex can disassemble or weaken, weakening the flow over the Arctic, which usually means trouble for the United States.
It's nice and circular. It's like it's confining the cold air to the Arctic. But when it starts to become more elongated, or if it splits, then that cold air can travel a little bit more further south.
What immediately comes to mind? The winter of 2013-14 and 2014-15.
What made those two winters so interesting and so cold from our perspective was not that it was the coldest, you didn't have the coldest days on record, but what you had was a persistent cold winter. So in that case, we were stuck in that same pattern for most of the days of that winter, and so that's what really made it such a record-breaking, or at least seemed like, a very important, very different kind of winter. I traveled to New York City, and in New York, I all of a sudden didn't need to wear my big parka. I could wear my normal winter coat that I normally wear in Montreal. And so I thought, and from my perspective, it was much warmer. But to the people living in New York, this was still a really cold winter. So to them, they were complaining, as rightfully so, that it was a very cold winter. So you can think of my traveling from Montreal to New York City as being the climate change part, and the occurrence of that winter being kind of that happening more often, being kind of that change in the variability. So how often it's happening.
Research has shown going forward more disassembling of the polar vortex may occur. This can be enhanced by reduced snow and ice cover in the Arctic. The melting of snow and ice leads to less reflected solar radiation, which means increased evaporation and transpiration, thereby altering the pressure and temperature gradients of the polar vortex. When jet stream amplitude increases, atmospheric Rossby waves propagate to the south, transporting warmer air to the poles and polar air into lower latitudes.
I mean, there are a host of things that are happening with global climate change. It is a complicated problem. You have changes in circulation in the tropics, from increased temperatures. You have reducing Arctic sea ice cover, you have changes in the ocean temperatures, and all of these things can impact the mid-latitude circulations. And so this is very, very active area of research right now. It's difficult because it's really hard to tease out all of these different factors.
While the polar vortex typically brings unusual cold to the northern United States, it's important to remember it's a very natural feature of our climate and atmosphere. While still a hot research topic, Dr. Jervis' research shows this disassembling of the polar vortex has become more common in recent years, with projections that this will continue as our planet also continues to warm. For Up in the Air, I'm Juklo.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we do have quite a complex forecast for the weekend ahead, so let's just walk through it one last time, beginning with Friday. It is going to be a rainy start, but the rain showers will taper off throughout the day. It'll become more scattered in nature. Temperature-wise, 55 degrees for your daytime high on Friday. Very un-January-like, but with that cold front coming through, temperatures will begin to bottom out. For Saturday, temperatures will be right around freezing. That's where we expect the most wintry mix, the most sleet, the most ice coming through. But as a cold front comes through, temperatures will continue to plummet throughout the day on Saturday. The rain showers and the wintry mix will transition over into snow. And come Sunday, though, that Canadian air will work its way down into our neck of the woods. Temperatures down into the lower 20s for Saturday afternoon, with overnight lows dropping down to the single digits. So if you're going out, planning on taking in whatever sunshine there is on Sunday and Monday, do bundle up. It is going to be quite chilly. Let's just take one last look at the coming week ahead. Our best chance of snow, I think, is going to be on Tuesday, but even then, I think they're going to be very scattered in nature. But take a look at all that sunshine from Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Temperature-wise, though, we are going to take a little trip back to the icebox, especially early in the week. Temperatures right around 20 degrees for daytime highs, overnight lows down in the single digits. But come Wednesday, Thursday, we start to warm up, and then finally for next weekend, temperatures will be right around average for this time of year. The good news is, though, this thaw will not last for very long. That cold Arctic air will retreat sooner than we think, and temperatures will be right back to around average as we continue to work through the month of January.
Wow, Jake, it seems after this weekend storm, we're going to unfortunately be going back into our trend of the cold, so bundle up, folks.
Yep, as much as it pains me to say it, Old Man Winter is going to have his firm grip right over Happy Valley.
Well, speaking of the cold, earlier in the show, we asked you when was the term polar vortex first mentioned? Was it A, 1853, B, 1909, C, 1964, or D, 2013? If you guessed A, you are correct. Though it seems like the phrase polar vortex has only been around for a short while, the term was first used in Littell's Living Age, a literary periodical comprising pieces of the best American and British magazines and newspapers.
Yeah, it's only been in the last couple of years, though, that the term has really been engraved into our American lexicon. What do you think of the term, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, just thinking back to a couple winters ago in 2014, and now here we are again hearing about it. So I can definitely agree with you there, Jake.
Well, being a California boy, I was first exposed to the polar vortex not too long ago, so I'm still getting a little used to it, even after 4 years at Penn State.
Yes, definitely here in Pennsylvania. Well, that's all we have today for this week's episode of Whether or Not. Again, I'm your host, Bree Guy.
And I've been your forecaster, Jake Langedyk.
And have a good weekend, folks.